Nathan Caldwell barely glanced up from his laptop when the door to his office swung open. "This better be important," he muttered, his fingers flying over the keyboard. He had a billion-dollar empire to run, and interruptions were rarely welcome. His assistant, Meredith, cleared her throat. "Your new executive assistant is here." Nathan exhaled sharply, finally looking up. He didn't particularly care who they had hired, only that they could handle the chaos of working directly under him. "Fine, send them in." The moment the woman stepped inside, Nathan felt like he'd been hit by a freight train. She was familiar, too familiar. Big brown eyes framed by dark lashes, soft waves of chestnut hair cascading over her shoulders, a hesitant yet warm smile that tugged at something deep inside him. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. But it was. His childhood, summer afternoons, laughter echoing in treehouses, whispered secrets under the stars. "Sophie," he breathed. Her smile faltered, confusion flickering in her expression. "Yes, how do you?" Then her eyes widened with realization. "Nathan," he stood so fast his chair nearly toppled over. "Oh my God," Sophie Montgomery, his first everything, his best friend, his childhood crush. The girl he had sworn at 12 years old that he would marry someday. And she was standing in his office. For a moment, neither of them spoke, both frozen in time, then Sophie let out a breathless laugh. "Wow. I can't believe this." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his mind scrambling to catch up. "You're my new assistant," she nodded, still looking just as stunned. "I had no idea this was your company." Nathan's chest tightened. He hadn't seen her in over 15 years. After her family had moved away, they had lost touch. He had thought about her often, but life had swept him forward: college, business, building his empire. And now, fate had dropped her right into his world again. He shook his head, still in disbelief. Wow," Sophie chuckled, but there was a nervous edge to it. "Is this going to be weird?" Nathan's lips quirked up. "Probably," she laughed, and for a second it was like they were kids again. But then reality set in. She was his employee. He was her boss, and he was absolutely, completely screwed. The first few days were torture. Nathan found himself watching Sophie more than he should. The way she bit her lip in concentration, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she laughed, soft, genuine, the same as he remembered. She was brilliant, too. Organized, quick-thinking, effortlessly handling the chaos of his schedule. But it wasn't just that. It was the way she still knew him, the way she could anticipate what he needed before he even asked, the way she could call him out without hesitation. Like now. "You're overworking yourself," she said, dropping a coffee on his desk. He smirked. "You've been here less than a week and you're already bossing me around," she arched a brow. "Nathan, I knew you when you were a kid who ate way too much candy and refused to wear matching socks. You think I'm intimidated by CEO Nathan Caldwell?" he chuckled, shaking his head. "Fine." "Noted." She leaned against his desk, crossing her arms. "So, do you still eat too much candy?" He grinned. "No, but the sock thing, that's still a problem," she laughed, shaking her head. "Some things never change." His chest tightened. No, they don't, and neither did his feelings. Because despite everything, he was falling for her all over again. Hard. And this time, he wasn't sure he could stop it. Nathan had always prided himself on control. Control over his company, his emotions, his life. But with Sophie back in his orbit, control was slipping through his fingers like sand. Every day, she was there, efficient, sharp, completely unaware of the effect she had on him. She moved through his office like she belonged there, as if the years apart had never happened. And that was the problem. Because Nathan couldn't stop thinking about the past. About the girl who used to challenge him to climb the highest trees. The girl who had once stolen his jacket on a chilly autumn night and refused to give it back. The girl he had told in a rare moment of childhood bravery that he would always protect. Sophie had been his best friend, and then she had been gone. Now she was here. But she wasn't just Sophie anymore, she was his assistant and he was her boss. The boundaries were clear, weren't they? He was trying to keep things professional, truly. But then came the gala. It was an annual event, one of the most important nights for Caldwell Enterprises, with investors, partners, and high-profile clients in attendance. Sophie had been handling the logistics flawlessly, managing everything so efficiently that Nathan barely had to think about it. Then, an hour before they were supposed to leave, she knocked on his office door. When he looked up, he forgot how to breathe. Sophie stood in the doorway, wearing a floor-length, midnight blue gown that fit her like it had been made for her. The soft fabric skimmed her curves, and the delicate straps exposed just enough of her shoulders to make his pulse stutter. She wasn't just beautiful, she was breathtaking. He forced himself to speak. "You're coming," she tilted her head, amused. "I organized half this event." "Did you think I was just going to sit at home and hope it went well?" Nathan cleared his throat, pushing back whatever ridiculous thoughts were creeping into his head. "Right." "Of course." She stepped inside, adjusting the bracelet on her wrist. "Don't look so surprised. Besides, you need someone to make sure you don't glare at investors all night," he smirked. "I don't glare," she gave him a knowing look. "Nathan, your neutral expression alone has probably terrified half of your board members," he chuckled, shaking his head. "Fine. You win." But as they arrived at the gala, Nathan quickly realized that Sophie wasn't just there to keep things running smoothly. She belonged in this world, effortlessly. She moved through the crowd with confidence, engaging in conversations with ease. Investors who usually required weeks of negotiation were charmed within minutes. Clients who were notoriously difficult were laughing at her jokes. Nathan had known she was intelligent. He had known she was capable. But watching her now, he saw something else, something he hadn't fully acknowledged before. She wasn't just the girl from his past. She was a woman who could hold her own in any room. A woman who, if he wasn't careful, could completely dismantle the careful walls he had built around himself. And then, just when he thought the night couldn't shake him any further, he overheard something that made his stomach tighten. "She's impressive," one of his senior executives commented to another. "Caldwell's assistant, right?" The other man nodded. "Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he was interested in her. Did you see the way he looks at her?" Nathan stiffened. The way he looked at her, he forced himself to turn away, pretending he hadn't heard a word, because acknowledging it would mean facing the truth, and the truth was dangerous. Because the truth was he was interested, more than interested, and that terrified him. Nathan was losing control. For weeks, he had convinced himself that he could keep things professional with Sophie, but the gala had shattered that illusion. Watching her command a room, charm investors, and fit so seamlessly into his world, it had been a wake-up call. He wanted her, and it wasn't just a fleeting attraction. It was something deeper, something he had buried for years. But the problem remained: she worked for him. And Sophie, blissfully unaware of the war raging inside him, continued on as if nothing had changed. Late nights in the office became a dangerous game of restraint. She'd bring him coffee without asking, knowing exactly how he took it. She'd tease him when he got too serious, effortlessly diffusing the tension that always built between them. And worst of all, she trusted him completely. Which was why, when she knocked on his office door one evening, frustration furrowed between her brows, he braced himself for whatever was coming. She stepped inside, holding a folder. "Nathan, we have a problem." The urgency in her tone snapped him into focus. "What is it?" She placed the file on his desk, flipping it open. "The Crawford deal, the contracts have discrepancies. The language around the acquisition terms doesn't match what was agreed upon in negotiations." Nathan's jaw tightened. The Crawford deal was massive. Any misstep could cost his company millions. "How bad is it?" he asked. Sophie gave him a measured look. "Bad enough that if we don't fix it before the signing tomorrow, we could be locked into terms that favor Crawford's side." Nathan scanned the documents, irritation simmering. Someone had either made a mistake or deliberately altered the terms. Either way, it needed to be fixed. He leaned back, exhaling sharply. We'll have to go through the contracts line by line. This is going to take all night, Sophie nodded without hesitation. Then let's get to work. He should have told her to go home. This wasn't her battle to fight. But she had already taken a seat across from him, flipping through the pages with a determined expression. Nathan found himself watching her, noticing the way she chewed her lip in concentration, the way she made precise notes in the margins. Hours passed in tense silence, interrupted only by the occasional exchange of findings. Midnight came and went, the city outside growing quieter. At some point, Sophie stretched, rolling her shoulders. I think I found another inconsistency in Section 5. Nathan rubbed the back of his neck, exhaustion creeping in. Good. Let's flag it. She glanced at him then, concern flickering in her eyes. You need a break, he smirked. I could say the same for you, she sighed, leaning back in her chair. This job is going to turn me into a workaholic, isn't it? Nathan's lips twitched. Welcome to my world. She studied him for a moment. You don't ever slow down, do you? He hesitated. No one ever asked him that. Finally, he exhaled. I can't afford to. Sophie tilted her head. You built this empire, you could step back if you wanted to. Nathan shook his head. Stepping back means losing control, and in this world, control is everything. She frowned slightly, as if she didn't entirely agree, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she reached for a pen, tapping it against the table. You know, when we were kids, you used to say you wanted to invent something crazy. Something no one had ever thought of before. Nathan blinked. He hadn't thought about that in years. She smiled faintly. You had all these wild ideas. A self-cleaning treehouse, a robot that could do your homework, he chuckled. I had priorities. She laughed softly, shaking her head. I guess I just wonder. Do you ever miss that? Nathan stared at her, something shifting in his chest. No one had ever asked him that either, and he wasn't sure he had an answer. Before he could respond, Sophie yawned, covering her mouth. Nathan immediately stood. That's it, you're done for the night. She blinked up at him. But we're not finished, I'll handle the rest, he insisted. You need sleep. Sophie hesitated, but exhaustion was evident in her expression. Finally, she relented, standing up. Fine. But don't stay up all night either. Nathan smirked. No promises. As she left the office, something settled heavily in his gut. She made him remember things he had long buried. And that was dangerous, because the more time he spent with Sophie, the more he realized one undeniable truth. He didn't just want her in his past, he wanted her in his future. Nathan had spent years navigating high-stakes business deals, forging billion-dollar contracts, and handling ruthless corporate negotiations. Yet nothing had prepared him for the way Sophie had unraveled him completely. The night after they had worked late on the Crawford deal, he had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her the way she looked at him with quiet concern, the way her laugh still had the ability to shake something loose inside of him. And worse, the way she had reminded him of the boy he used to be before his life had become a relentless pursuit of success. He was slipping, and he knew it. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty: he didn't want to fight this anymore. The realization hit him like a freight train. There was no denying it, he wanted Sophie. Not just as a fleeting desire, not just as a passing attraction. He wanted her in his life permanently, and that meant he had to do something about it. The next morning, he walked into the office with a plan. He wasn't going to wait for things to unfold naturally. He had spent too much time letting life dictate his choices. This was one thing he wasn't going to leave to chance. But before he could act, fate threw another wrench in his plans. He stepped into his office to find Sophie standing by the window, her posture tense, her hands gripping a piece of paper. She turned when she heard him enter, and the look on her face sent a sharp pulse of unease through him. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice quieter than usual. Nathan closed the door behind him. What's wrong? She hesitated before handing him the paper she had been holding. He took it, scanning the contents quickly. It was a job offer. A high-level position at a different company, a competitor. His stomach turned to stone. "You're leaving?" The words came out harsher than he intended. Sophie shook her head quickly. "No. I haven't accepted. I don't even know if I want to, but I got the offer last night and I thought you should know." Nathan exhaled, forcing himself to think. Of course she was being recruited. She was brilliant, competent, and anyone who had seen her in action would know she was an asset. The logical part of him knew that. But the emotional part of him, the part he had spent years suppressing, was screaming that he couldn't let this happen. He set the paper down on his desk, fixing his gaze on her. "Do you want to take it?" She hesitated. "I don't know." Nathan took a step closer, his pulse hammering. "Sophie, if you're staying because of professional loyalty, don't. You deserve to do what's best for you." She looked up at him, her expression conflicted. "It's not just about the job, Nathan." He swallowed hard. "Then what is it about?" A tense silence stretched between them, and then, finally, Sophie spoke. "I don't know if I can keep working for you," she admitted. "Not because of the job, not because of the workload, but because of this." She gestured between them, her voice softer now. "Whatever this is," Nathan's heart clenched. There it was. Out in the open, he didn't hesitate, he couldn't. "This," he said, stepping even closer, "is me realizing that I don't want to go another day pretending I don't feel something for you." Sophie's breath hitched. Nathan reached for her hand, holding it gently. "I spent years thinking I had moved on from the past, but then you walked into my office and suddenly nothing made sense anymore. Because I realized that I never moved on, I never forgot you, and I don't want to pretend anymore." Sophie's fingers curled around his instinctively, her eyes searching his. "Nathan." He cupped her face with his free hand, tilting her chin up. "Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll let you go. I swear I will." A beat of silence. Then she exhaled shakily. "I do." The words sent a rush of relief through him, but he didn't move, not yet. He needed to hear all of it. "But I'm scared," she admitted. "This job, this company, it means everything to you. And if we risk this and it goes wrong?" Nathan shook his head. "I don't care about the company more than I care about you." Sophie blinked, caught off guard. He tightened his grip on her hand. "I built this company from nothing, and I'm proud of it, but it's not my life, you are." A sharp inhale, a flicker of emotion in her eyes, and then, finally, she broke. She surged forward, wrapping her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. Nathan held her tightly, feeling something inside him settle for the first time in years. She wasn't just his past, she was his future. And this time he wasn't going to let her go. Nathan had never been the type to hesitate. He made decisions quickly, decisively, with the full weight of his confidence behind them. But standing in his office, holding Sophie close, he realized this was the first time in years that a choice had truly mattered. Because this wasn't just business. It wasn't just a fleeting attraction, it was Sophie. And nothing, not his company, not the complications of their professional relationship, not even his own fears, was more important than that. When she finally pulled back, her eyes searching his face, he braced himself for whatever she was about to say. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. He exhaled, brushing his thumb against her cheek. "Then we'll figure it out together." A hint of a smile ghosted her lips, but uncertainty still lingered in her expression. "Nathan, this changes everything." He nodded. "I know." Sophie hesitated. "And if it doesn't work," he didn't even flinch, "then at least we tried. But I'm not going to let fear stop me from being with you." She let out a slow breath, as if weighing the truth of his words. Then, finally, she gave a small nod. "Okay." Relief surged through him, but he didn't let himself revel in it for long. There were still things that needed to be addressed, things he wouldn't let fester into problems. "We need to be smart about this," he said. "I don't want you to feel like your career is tied to me. If you want another position in the company, I'll make that happen. If you want to leave and take that other job, I won't stop you, but I don't want it to be something you regret later. Sophie studied him for a long moment. I don't want to leave, something in his chest loosened. But I also don't want to be seen as the CEO's girlfriend who got special treatment, she added. Nathan smirked. You do realize you've spent the past few months bossing me around more than any assistant I've ever had, right? A laugh escaped her, and the tension between them eased slightly. I mean it, he continued. You've earned everything here on your own, but if you'd be more comfortable in a different role, we'll make that happen. She considered it. Let me think about it, of course. For the first time since she had walked into his office all those weeks ago, things felt settled. Not entirely, not perfectly, but for the first time, there was no unspoken tension hanging over them. Nathan had her, and he wasn't going to let anything ruin that. For the next few weeks, they navigated the shift carefully. At work, Sophie remained as professional as ever, but there was an ease between them now, a quiet understanding. She still challenged him, still kept him in check. But there were moments, fleeting glances, lingering touches when no one was watching that made it impossible to ignore the change. Outside the office, things were different. Their first official date had been a quiet rooftop dinner at his penthouse, away from prying eyes. He had cooked something he hadn't done in years, and Sophie had teased him relentlessly about his lack of culinary skills. You're a billionaire, Nathan. You could have literally any chef in the world at your disposal. He had smirked, pouring her a glass of wine. But then I wouldn't get to impress you with my mediocre pasta. She had laughed, shaking her head. I hate to break it to you, but I think your assistant, whoever she was before me, has been ordering takeout and lying to you about it. He had chuckled, shaking his head. Probably. But despite the teasing, the night had been perfect, because it had just been them, no company, no business, no complications. And Nathan realized then that he had never been happier. Of course, nothing stayed simple forever. A few weeks later, the inevitable happened. Whispers started circulating in the office. It was subtle at first, curious glances, hushed conversations as he and Sophie passed by. Then, one afternoon, Meredith, his assistant, stepped into his office with a knowing look. You're not exactly subtle, you know, Nathan raised a brow. Excuse me, she smirked. You and Sophie, people are talking. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. I figured this would happen eventually. Meredith crossed her arms. So, what's the plan? Because if you think you can just ignore it and hope it goes away, you're underestimating how much people love office gossip. Nathan wasn't surprised. He had built this company on control, on calculated decisions. His employees respected him, but they also thrived on speculation. He had no intention of letting rumors dictate his relationship. We're going to be honest about it, he said simply. Meredith blinked. Really, he nodded. There's nothing inappropriate about it. We're two consenting adults, and Sophie has decided to move into a different department to avoid any conflicts. Meredith let out a low whistle. Well, that'll certainly shut down most of the office gossip. People were probably expecting some big scandal. Nathan smirked. They'll be disappointed then. Meredith chuckled. Probably. But for what it's worth, I think you two make a great team. Nathan's chest warmed. Because for the first time he truly believed that too. A month later, things had settled. Sophie had transitioned into a new role, one she had chosen for herself, one that suited her skills and ambitions. The rumors had died down, replaced by the natural rhythm of work. And Nathan. He had everything he could have ever wanted. One evening, as they walked through the city after dinner, Sophie slipped her hand into his. You know, she mused, glancing up at him, I think 12-year-old Nathan would be very proud of you. He raised a brow. Yeah, she nodded. You always said you wanted to build something great. And you did. Nathan studied her in the glow of the streetlights. I did, but it turns out the thing I'm most proud of isn't the company. Sophie tilted her head. Then what is it? He squeezed her hand. Sophie's breath caught, and for a moment she just stared at him, emotion flickering in her eyes. Then, with a soft laugh, she leaned up and kissed him. And Nathan knew, without a doubt, that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Nathan had never been a man who doubted his decisions. He built Caldwell Enterprises with relentless ambition, forged his success through sheer determination. Yet, standing in his penthouse with Sophie in his arms, certainty took on a new meaning. This wasn't just another calculated risk. This was his future. As the weeks passed, their relationship became something effortless and undeniable. Their worlds, once tangled in the complications of work and unspoken feelings, had shifted into something solid. Sophie wasn't just a part of his life, she was his life. But even perfection had its challenges. One evening, as Nathan arrived home after a demanding day, he found Sophie sitting on the couch, a thoughtful expression on her face. Something about her stillness made him pause. He set his briefcase down and joined her, sensing the weight of whatever was on her mind. "What's going on?" She hesitated, then met his gaze. "I got a call today." "From my parents." Nathan leaned back slightly, surprised. Sophie rarely spoke about her family. He knew they had moved away when she was young, and that her relationship with them was complicated at best. "They're in town," she continued, her fingers tracing the seam of a cushion. "And they want to meet for dinner." Nathan studied her carefully. "And how do you feel about that?" A sigh escaped her. "Conflicted. I haven't seen them in years. We were never exactly close, and when I moved back to the city, I didn't expect them to suddenly reach out. But they insist they want to reconnect." Nathan reached for her hand, running his thumb along her knuckles. "Do you want to see them?" She exhaled slowly. "I think so. But I don't know what they expect," and she hesitated, then looked up at him. "I want you to come with me." Something warm spread through his chest. This wasn't just about a dinner. This was Sophie letting him into a part of her life she had kept guarded. He didn't hesitate. "Of course I'll go." Relief flickered in her expression, and she leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. "Thank you." Nathan pressed a kiss to her hair. "Whatever happens, you won't face it alone." The restaurant was elegant but not over the top, the kind of place where conversations remained hushed and the lighting cast everything in a soft glow. Nathan arrived with Sophie, his hand resting on the small of her back in a gesture of quiet reassurance. Her parents were already seated, and as they approached, Nathan took in the way Sophie subtly steeled herself. Her mother was well-dressed, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. Her father, slightly more relaxed, offered a polite nod as they sat. Introductions were made, and as expected, her parents were instantly aware of who Nathan was. His name carried weight in this city, and their reactions were a mix of intrigue and quiet assessment. The conversation started politely enough small talk, questions about Sophie's work, passing comments about the city. But there was something unspoken beneath it all, something unsaid between Sophie and her parents. It wasn't until halfway through the meal that her mother finally addressed it. "We were surprised to hear you stayed in the city," she said, setting down her wine glass. "Especially considering how quickly you left all those years ago." Sophie's grip on her fork tightened slightly. "I left because I needed to." A pause. "And you never reached out." Nathan felt the weight of Sophie's silence before she spoke again. "Neither did you." Her father cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "We made mistakes," he admitted, "but we want to fix things now." Sophie's gaze remained steady. "Why now?" Her mother hesitated. "Because we realized we don't want to spend the rest of our lives estranged from our only daughter." Nathan felt Sophie's fingers brush against his under the table, a fleeting touch, but one that spoke volumes. She was holding herself together, but this wasn't easy. He didn't interject. This was her moment, her choice. After a moment, Sophie exhaled. "I don't know if we can just pretend the past doesn't exist, but if you're willing to try, so am I." Something softened in her father's expression, Her mother gave a small nod. It wasn't perfect. But it was a start, and as they left the restaurant later that night, Nathan wrapped an arm around Sophie's shoulders, pulling her close. "I'm proud of you," he murmured. She smiled up at him, something lighter in her gaze. "I think I'm proud of me too." Months passed, and life fell into a rhythm that felt natural, effortless. Sophie's relationship with her family remained tentative but improving, and her career flourished in her new position. And Nathan. Nathan knew, without a doubt, that he had never been surer of anything in his life. One evening, as they stood on his penthouse balcony overlooking the city, he turned to her, reaching into his pocket. Sophie glanced at him, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What?" Nathan took a steady breath, then dropped to one knee, her breath caught. "Sophie," he said, his voice steady, certain, "I've spent years building a life I thought I wanted. But none of it means anything without you." A soft, stunned laugh escaped her. "Nathan," he pulled out the ring, the diamond catching the light, "I don't want a life where you're just a part of it. I want a life with you, forever." Sophie stared at him, eyes shining, and then, with absolute certainty, she smiled. "Yes." The moment she said it, Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. The city stretched before them, endless and full of possibilities. But Nathan only cared about one thing, the woman in his arms, his future, his forever.